Welcome everyone to Coach to You. I'm your host, Coach Regina, and today we will be talking about breaking the stigma surrounding mental health. Today's podcast, you guys, is a very dear topic because I find myself, researching, doing, kind of like reading articles and different, topics on the stigma surrounding mental health. And so today I actually wanted to take a little bit of time to kind of talk about the stigmas and how the stigmas actually affect us in our everyday society. So, if you think about someone who may be struggling with mental illness and you know that they don't talk about it per se, but you can find yourself being around the person. You can find them maybe disoriented at times or just kind of like not in tune with the current reality at that time. All too well, a person may or may not be dealing with some form of mental illness, but because of the stigma surrounding it, people generally just don't talk about it. And so today, I want to build transparency around those stigmas and being able to provide a sense of safe haven to people who may be battling some form of mental illness. Okay? So, guys, let me go ahead and give my disclaimer. I am not a licensed healthcare professional. All content and information on this channel stems from my personal experience and extensive research and is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional medical advice. If you feel you have a mental health condition, seek the guidance of a medical professional. All right, guys. So, again, today we'll be talking about the stigma surrounding mental health. Okay? On this platform, I tend to, be very transparent about my own uh, battle with mental health conditions. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder back in 2012, and shortly before that, I had actually just found my father after him being out of my life for 30 some odd years. And that was really, really challenging for me. We fast forward, I built the relationship with him in a strand of 7 years. And in that time, I got a chance to learn a lot about my father. I got a chance to find his likes and his dislikes and also understand why he was not a part of my life. My father also suffered with major depression and bipolar disorder. So, realizing that my mom had her difficulties, I would actually say I would have been a breeding ground for battling mental health illness at some point in my life. Okay, a lot of it stems from genetics, environmental stressors, and other abnormalities. But genes are typically the association of mental illnesses. Genes don't turn themselves on. Genes have to be triggered. So I did not find out about the detriment of the bipolar disorder until later in my life. Okay, they diagnosed me in like 2011 or 2012, and then I didn't find out just how much it was a major impact on my life until around 2019. My father died, and I did not grieve. He passed away in late 2018, and my son was just born. He was 6 months, at the time. And so I think I just dived right into work, found myself, utilizing that as a means of coping, and I did not grieve. So we fast forward 2019, everything felt like it just began to crash down on me at one time. And so even though I had this prior diagnosis, I generally just kind of lived my life in some form of normalcy, if you will. So that is kind of like the nutshell in how I come to discover, you know, the condition of bipolar disorder and major depression, if you will. This understanding has really afforded me access to experiences that I never could imagine. Um, I found myself being around other people who also struggled with mental illnesses, but they appeared normal, right? I understand now that that normalcy was sort of like a mask, and our ability to be able to cope in societal conditioning with a lot of the stressors that occurred in life. In 2019, I started to experience mania, grandiose thinking, psychosis, and even severe episodes. Like, the illness began to just kind of take its toll on my friendships, my relationships, my work, and things like that. And I didn't have any methodology of coping with the condition at that time. So I found out that I love to write. And so I produced my first book, um, From Wretched to Writer. And that was a part of me being able to finally release a lot of what was pent up inside from my childhood, trauma that I had experienced. Everything from then on was basically me trying to understand the relationship between mental illness and who I am as a person. And that's kind of what brought me to make this podcast surrounding the stigma of mental illness, if you will. So what I want to do is talk about, a little bit about some of the common stigmas that are associated with mental illness. And I also want to talk about real life experiences. Like I just mentioned to you, you know, it affected my personal life, my relationships, my work, and other areas of my life as well. But some of the stigmas surrounding, mental illness would be it being a weakness or a character flaw. Many people believe that experiencing mental health conditions are dangerous, and people around you may be dangerous in that regard. They make it seem like it's a sign of weakness, or that individuals should simply like toughen up and find ways to to cope with it rather than struggling and seeking help. You know, loosely utilizing words like that person's crazy, or that person is this or that, if you will. That in itself can be dangerous, because when we approach mental illness in a pervasive, stereotypical way, it causes individuals to kind of clench up and go inside themselves without the realization that mental illness is real. Okay, for me, I spent years doing research on what bipolar actually was. And yeah, I didn't want to talk about it at first, because I too would associate it with, crazy, if you will. But then as I began to research and understand, its derivatives and how it's triggered and different things like that, and I found out that it's essentially a mood disorder, and that there's basically a chemical imbalance in the brain, where a person experiences highs and lows and different shifts in their mood. And basically, a lot of it is environmental. Your relationships, the people that are in your life that also may be experiencing some form of their own internal struggles, and they're not ready to deal with it. So even though you may have this realization that you are affected by your emotional state because of the mood disorder, these people that you may be in contact with may not have this sort of realization. So you are at the mercy of always feeling like you are wrong. That's a reality. And that's one of the stigmas associated with mental illnesses. Another stigma is the inability to function. People believe that those who battle mental illnesses is that they don't have the ability to function, or that it's debilitating. They believe that those who struggle with them cannot lead productive lives. The stigma can also undermine the achievements of individuals who manage their conditions successfully. Once I honestly began to understand what the condition was, I'm going to be honest with you, I probably thrived better in my life than I ever did before. I'm a writer. I produce content on my podcast, running a business, being a mom. You don't ever want to feel diminished in your capacity to do anything. However, you also have to be mindful that these particular areas of environmental struggles can indeed trigger certain mental setbacks in you. When you're overwhelmed and you feel like the symptoms are above your ability to cope, that's when I think that it's best, you're at your best, or you're at a peak for really trying to understand what's happening in your life at that time. I know for me, I had a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors before then. I tend to break everything and everyone that was around me. When this happens, I try to rebuild myself from nothing. And I say this in a sense of not taking it lightly, because you need people. We were created for companionship. So when I would experience these moments of depression, and these episodes of mania and grandiose thinking, if you will, I would generally feel like I was on top of the world sometime, and that I could accomplish anything. And I would experience these highs for some time, weeks on end. But when I crashed, I crashed. And the wake of the people that I hurt was left to naught. And that's basically how it is. For others, they may battle a more severe mental illnesses such as schizophrenia, a major PTSD, and other, cognitive behavioral issues. Regardless of what your mental health challenge is, there are stigmas. For me, I just realized that the common stigmas were those that were, again, more pervasive, where, people just kind of downplay the situation, if you will. So, misunderstanding of condition is another stigma. Mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder are often misunderstood. Many think that they are merely temporary feelings rather than legitimate medical conditions that require treatment. Again, we talked about something being dangerous. This is dangerous because I'm going to tell you something. If you sit in an environment soaking in your emotions alone, that is a breeding ground for disaster. Because once that brain begins to spiral, there's really no coming back from that. I am telling you, I have been there. Okay? So removing the pervasive misunderstanding of that the person to get over it, or they'll be okay, or whatever the case may be. It's a harsh way of thinking. Many of my associates, they consider me the strong one. I can encourage you through what you're going through, and whatever I can see you through it, the difficulties and so forth. But when it came time for me to have my own mental health experience, I often felt alone. I didn't feel the courage to pick up the phone and talk to anyone because I was always considered the strong one. But who does the counselor call when the counselor needs help? Judgment and shame is another stigma. Individuals may fear being judged or shamed by others they disclose their mental health struggles to. This fear can lead to silence and prevent people from seeking the support they need. This is very common. Once a person develops a thought process surrounding something you share with them in confidence, in solitude, they will tend to utilize that as a weapon when times of, like when you get into a heated conversation, a person feel like, they're not winning, or whatever the case may be, they'll bring that up. Oh, that's why, you have this, or that's why you have that. And that is the most toxic environment a person who battles mental health issues can be in. Another one is stereotyping based on the diagnosis. Certain diagnoses like schizophrenia or personality disorders are often associated with severe stigmas. These labels can lead to discrimination, impacting individuals' social interactions and employment opportunities. It also causes debilitating fear of being judged or ousted by individuals. My mom did not, she was not a part of my life and did not want to be a part of my life, if you will. I was abandoned by her by age 2. I grew up with so much turmoil inside of me by not having my mother there as my caretaker. That's another form of trauma that a child experiences. As I got older, I developed such a hatred for her that I began to self sabotage my own life because of that hatred. And I did it to such a degree that at some point I stopped feeling like I, hated her, to the fact that I hated myself, that I wasn't lovable, and why didn't she want me, and different things like that. And so this toxic way of thinking caused me to self-sabotage relationships and so forth. As I got older, I began to try to turn the tables in regards to what occurred through the abandonment and rejection of my mom. Speaking to other family members, I began to hear her story and realized that, wow, this lady really struggled, growing up. She had her form of molestation and prostitution and abuse and abandonment and things of that nature by her own family. And so what happens is, we, on our DNA, there's a part of it called histones. And there, it's either Greek or Hebrew. You could look it up in your own time. And that it indicates that is history. Well, if you know anything about history, history has a way of repeating itself. So when your parents are born with trauma, they pass that trauma down through the DNA, and that child becomes susceptible to those experiences in their own life. If you're not familiar with this, you will make life choices based off of those traumatic experiences that your parents went through, rather than realizing that you are the author and finisher of your own life's destiny, and you can rewrite your story. I didn't know that at the time. As a child, an adolescent, growing up, those self-sabotaging behaviors were indicative to someone who was lonely, rejected, and abandoned. And it spilled over into my work ethic, into my relationships, as well as other parts of my life. So the stereotyping based on the diagnosis, all I ever heard was my mom was crazy. That's all I ever heard. I didn't hear all the other parts about her life until later down the line. Now I'm a student of psychology, and I'm understanding the mechanisms of the brain and how it works, and how trauma causes the brain to almost separate and become fragmented. We begin to compartmentalize those different parts of our life into different areas, and in that, it becomes hard to cope. Subconsciously, the mind begins to house those memories, and in that, the person, if they don't heal or get some form of treatment or understand cognitive behavioral tips, that is literally a cesspool of life's trajectory of continuous ups, down, battles, ups, downs, and battles. And I too experienced it. So I transformed that hatred that I had for myself and my mom into a sense of wanting to understand. I wanted to understand her. I wanted to understand myself. And in that, that is what ultimately speared my life into a sense of wanting to love myself, forgive myself, and forgive her, as well as my abusers, for the past hurts and afflictions that I endured. Last one, guys, is cultural stigmas. Basically, compartmentalizing different cultures in taboo unmentionables as to how this culture may deal with this one, this particular issue, or this culture here may deal with this particular issue or struggle. All these are basically cultural stigmas that basically block individuals from finding their true sense of identity, but more or less being impacted based off of where they live and their community involvement. Okay. The last one is overgeneralization. Now, this particular belief here is that all individuals with mental health conditions will behave in a certain way. Example being unreliable, overly emotional, and this can also perpetuate stigmas of misunderstanding. Yes, some of these things do come up. And the problem with that is that when we overgeneralize, we create what's called a pendulum. And the more people think in a certain way in relation to a particular issue, that issue becomes heightened, and it almost brings a sense of rightness to it, if you will. But here's the truth. When a person actually takes responsibility for their life, for their own choices, and for their own health issues, they become empowered. Holding stigmas against a person because of a mental illness is in itself damaging. People need love. People need understanding. They need respect. They need to be valued. But only if they can do it for themselves. Because we understand how the energetic momentum is, what energy we put out there in the world, we also attract to us. Okay? So when a person shows you that they too desire to be valued, respected, and they give that out into the world, that person is also worthy of receiving those things in their lives. Okay? Take this information of learning the different stigmas surrounding mental illnesses and being able to understand and appreciate the good and the value that others have to offer in the world. My name is Coach Regina. I want to thank you for taking time to listen to my podcast. Thank you for allowing the transparency, and I appreciate your time. Good day.